Welcome to Chancy Gardeners Friendly advice service in my wonderful outdoor studio. I love being outdoors. I watch the weather all the time, but I want to talk a little bit about CO2 and show the listener, the viewer, that it's impossible that this is affecting the climate. In fact, it's so improbable. And the fact is, there is actually no scientific theory. There's a theory, but that's not actually a scientific theory. It's just conjecture with no foundation in science whatsoever, because if we take into consideration the actual amount of CO2 and what causes it to be into the atmosphere in the first place. Now, the amount of CO2 itself is a very important thing to understand, the amount of it and its distribution or dissipation. The amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, say it was 500 parts per billion, which it's not, it's 300 and something parts per million, then at that much, if carbon dioxide is at if it was say 10,000 parts per million, then it would be 1% of the atmosphere. If it's 500 parts per billion, it is 0.05% of the atmosphere. Australia's contribution, that's the whole of it, Australia's contribution of that is so small and insignificant that it is irrelevant, and is Australia pretending it's doing something about climate change is like if there was 500 people in a room and they're all smoking cigarettes, and Australian said, well, the Australian in the corner said, I'm going to put my cigarette out, and that's going to stop the smoking and this pollution. That's about the significance of the actions of Australian politicians and the Greens and all that, well, basically being dishonest and deceptive, especially towards the young people, which is actually quite alarming when you think about it for 2 minutes. The thing we know about CO2 is this, and we can go on and do an hour and a half long video on this, on the whole of climate, but I have to make it short. The thing about it is that as the ocean warmed after the Maunder minimum, which ended in the 18th century, then when the ocean warmed, it released a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere. At the same time, precipitation increased, therefore rainfall increased. Therefore, there was a greater abundance of crops all of a sudden in Europe and in England, in Britain, that then allowed for it to develop a stronger, more virile population, and then population started growing. But also at the same time, because of the release of objective rational appraisal of phenomena, or science if you like, and engineering, there came about the Industrial Revolution, which then benefited eventually. You know, people suffered like Dickinson's and that suffered, but eventually people all over the world live a far better life now than they did before, depending on your philosophy. And it must be true, because lots of people who are in pre-industrial societies or are desperate to get into the Western societies. So whatever they say is bad about our system, which the Greens and the left are saying, it's very, very strange the same people want lots and lots of refugees to come and join us in the system, what they say is rotten. It doesn't make sense. Why are so many trying to get in here? Why aren't we trying to get back into these pre-industrial societies? Why don't the left and the Greens go and live amongst the pre-industrial nations? Because that would solve their problem immediately. There'd be a lot less CO2 in evidence. There'd be other things in evidence as well they might not like the poverty and the starvation and illness caused by lack of economic activity, created by the lack, if you like, of CO2 as a result of industry and commerce and economics. But so, without a growth in CO2, well, life, as the world gets warmer, and as the world gets warmer from the Maunder minimum, the oceans warmed up incrementally from above with the sun, but that's not just only part of it, but a lot of it's from below, from the big mid-oceanic ridge what goes right around the planet that releases millions of cubic meters of hot gases into the ocean. So the oceans are getting warmed from below. You can't boil water very easily from the top. You still get off a bit of steam, but that's where clouds are formed, but the oceans are kept alive and warm, which keeps the planet alive from the below. Because they're radiated heat out of the earth, which is another part of the story one can tell. But because we can see that at 0.05% of the atmosphere, and then Australian, and that's natural phenomena, then human part is, well, you know, a small percentage of that is 4% of that, whatever, and it's so small, it's physically impossible for CO2 in any mathematical sense to warm up the planet, because it's not, as it were, one, it's not a pollution, which Bill Shorten thinks CO2 is a pollution, which extremely shows what an extremely ignorant man this man is. How is the leader of a government, or he wants to be a leader of Australia, which is extremely scary when you think someone so ignorant and dishonest can be a leader of a political party. You think, what is the rest of that party like? Because CO2 being such a small part, but it's the most essential compound known to life. Without CO2 there is no life on Earth. And the warmer the planet gets, this is the beauty, where are most of the populations on Earth? Where it's warmer. Where it's warmer, there is more breeding, more variety of organisms in the life. In the jungle, you know, where it's steamy jungles, that's when you get a massive range of different speciation. That's where they get the abundance of it, because the heat provides all you need to live on with not so much effort as it would if it was all very, very cold. We can go into the history of why cold generated the Industrial Revolution, but that's a different matter. That's another, if you like, adjunct to the story. The fact is, it's impossible for CO2, it takes, what they've done, in other words, is those of us who are really intrinsically involved with science all our lives, that is our religion, we can very rapidly catch up with any, or we're ahead, or catch up with any thing that's happening in the scientific world, because that is our basic interest. Yes, we've done that. That's we're addicted to that. So when someone like Al Gore, a failed politician, wants to get his own back in America for not voting me in, so he makes up this thing that the globe is warming or whatever it is, and whatever through CO2, and he makes up this mythological lie about inconvenient truth. The inconvenient truth for him, he's exposed as a fraud and a cultist. It's as simple as that. He's corrupting children's minds, saying, oh, we're having a dirty and polluted air. Well, I live here in some remote part of Australia and you couldn't get cleaner air anywhere where it's beautiful. And the thing about CO2, it's not a blanket. All these young people are having imagined that there's this blanket, a wrapped woolly blanket all over the earth warming it up. It's not like that. The most condensed part, or dense condensate of CO2, where it's most dense, if you like, greatest concentration, is in the major cities, say in China, and anyone's been to Shanghai and see the traffic jams there, or Beijing, the traffic down there, just amazing. Yes, and there's smog, but that's a different smog, is particulates, not CO2. Smog is caused by particulates and differences in air temperatures, if your temperature inclines, and if there's humidity in the air. Anyone who's lived in England at the time knows what smog is. CO2 does not cause smog, particulates do, and soot do, and all that sort of stuff. So all those people sitting there traffic, they're not getting ill because of CO2. People in Melbourne are not dropping dead in them traffic, stuck in traffic jams. If CO2 was a poison, when there's a massive concentration of it, well, immediately people will be getting ill. That they're not. Makes a fool if anyone says it's a pollution, because that's the greatest concentration of it. Is what? Measure the parts per million in a traffic jam and see what that is compared with where I live in a remote part of Australia. You see, it dissipates into vector currents, air currents, and then dissipates into the oceans, into the trees, into the light, and the grass. Every time there's grass growing, it's absorbing CO2. And the more warmer the planet is, the more abundance of life there will be, and the more CO2 is, and that's basically the rhythm and cycle of it. You go into big cold periods, we were in a big ice age for thousands of years, we came out of it, and it warmed up, life became abundant, the agricultural age came on, all that civilizations grew because of abundance of food, etc., because of the increase in warmth, which increases precipitation and rainfall, also releases CO2 out of the oxygen, out of the ocean, that then helps grow food, enough food to supply the people. So it's organic, it's totally natural and organic, that there's a combination of factors that then allow life itself, including humans, to adapt into a great abundance. And if the humans are the dominant species, that's how it is. And to those people who say there's too many humans on Earth, I say to them, you'll be the first to go, because I don't think there is. How do we know there's too many humans on the Earth? If another cataclysm hits the Earth, but it does on we think about 10,000 year period, or roughly, comet, or cataclysmic earth shift, or earthquakes, create massive wipe out civilization, and that could happen in 50, 60 years, we do not know. And then how many humans will be left after that? How many humans will be left if the ice age, which we think is coming now, hits the north and encroaches upon all the northern hemisphere above about the Humber, and there's a line you can work out where the mean average temperatures are, where it will not thaw out. It didn't thaw out during the morning minimum in that part of the world, in Yorkshire where I came from, and all round through there it didn't thaw out. The snow never thawed through summer. And if it goes that again, how do we feed all those people? You can't feed people with cold when it's cold, but you can feed an awful lot of people when it's hot, warm. The warmer it is, to a point, you can create a lot more food. I mean, even deserts create a lot of food if there's moisture involved. So all this panic that they're creating into children's heads is purely political and ideological and extremely dangerous, and it's something we have to take on. And it's not about a Labour Party or Liberal Party. I will never vote for either of them, because their people have let us down so badly. It's now a fight for survival for Australia as a nation, because globalism is a very dangerous idea. It's a sentimentalism towards the global climate system. There's no such thing as a global climate system. These people are just simply ignorant of basic geography, which I am not. It's my specialist subject, if you like. But the thing is, there is no such thing as a global climate, and there's no such thing as a global population. I mean, I don't see the Chinese sacrificing themselves for us, or Africans sacrificing themselves for us, and all these other people. I don't see the Indians sacrificing themselves for us, and I have no idea why we're being asked as a very minute part of the population of the world when we're being asked to sacrifice ourselves for the rest of the planet. White people are about outnumbered 40 to 1. So we are a minority group. Those of us who are scientifically inclined are a small percentage of that. We're the ones that they call stupid old men. We're the ones that these Greens and these left are after. Now we're hunting them. We're hunting them for our words. We used to use swords 1,000 years ago, and now we hunt them with words and wit, and with science and common sense. So, I'm Chancy Gardener, friendly advice channel. Advice: do not believe anything that says they believe anything. As David Bowie says, do not believe in belief, because it's a way of causing confusion and misleading the masses. Just do all your own research. Do not believe anyone. Allow your intuition and instinct to tell you what is right or wrong, and give it time for yourself, your being, your id if you like, to come and gain the insight it requires to see what the facts are. Basically, that's all there is to it. Be an independent individual. That's what they don't like, is actually diversity. They want everyone to think the same. Bye.